Welcome to In It to Win It. This is Steve Barton, and thank you for tuning in. We are here at the Silver Symposium with Rob Kientz of GoldSilverPros.com. Rob, thank you for coming back on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Okay, now you follow the government numbers quite a bit, things like jobs data, right? What are you seeing that the government's reporting, and what are the actual numbers?
Yeah, so the jobs numbers, I think, in my opinion, are a complete bunk, and the reason you know that is because they're constantly downward revising them all the time.
Yeah.
They're constantly saying that we've had a lot of job creation, and the BLS twice in the last year has modified their schema for how they can't count jobs. And at first they were like, well, there's a difference between their own, they run two surveys.
Yeah.
There's a household survey, and then there's a survey of like companies. And they weren't agreeing. And the household survey is actually closer to ADP, which is an independent private payroll company. And they said, well, we can't have that. We can't have this discrepancy. All they did was they whitewashed their household survey and made it match, their employer survey. And then ADS decided, oh, now we're not matching what the government has, so ADS changed theirs. And so now everybody's lying on their numbers. Well, then the BLS a month later said, wait a minute, we went too far with that. Actually, it's not actually turning out that way. We have a lot more unemployment. So they went backward again. But it's not just on the current reports. It's not just seasonally adjusting the last quarter, the last two quarters. They're doing it on the entire methodology.
Wow.
So they've changed their entire methodology twice in the last year, and they're still not right on it. At the end of the day, I think what you need to look at is it's the people that have rolled off. It's the old U6 number nobody ever talks about. The people after 1 year, they don't qualify for benefits, and they've rolled off. You can see that in the cities. You can see the homeless. You can see the anger and frustration of the younger generations who aren't getting jobs. That's your signal. Whatever the jobs number is by the government, all you have to do is look outside and see what's going on in your community, and I think that tells the truth.
Yeah.
And I'm done with all the revisions. I wrote in my book 12 years ago, I wrote, Chapter 2 was talking about government numbers, and they were, bumped back then, and they're even worse now.
And they're even worse now.
Yeah, and all you have to do is read Chapter 2 of that book, or just follow them yourself. Just go to the BLS website, look at their data, and you can see in there, they're like, well, we don't really know in our sampling methodology whether this is even anywhere correct, but we're good with it.
Yeah.
So.
Now, because there's a whole class of people that are able-bodied to work, but they're not even counted in the unemployment numbers, correct?
Yeah, those are what used to be the U6 numbers, which is people that are able-bodied, want to work, can't or are not getting benefits anymore, and so they're rolled off. And so what's quoted now is what's called the U3. They don't call it the U3 anymore because they don't want you to know there was a U6. There used to be a U7.
Okay.
Okay, there used to be all these classifications of employment. Now it's just unemployment.
Yeah.
And they've sanitized, the measures, and they've sanitized how they do it. One thing that you can look at that is published, you can find it, I believe, at the BLS and also at FRED, which is the Fed's database, is labor force participation rate. And that is simply how many people are working, how many people can work. And they don't screw around with that one. And so that number has actually fallen almost 4% since the Great Recession in 2008, 2009. So even all the money spending we had in the last 13 years, unemployment's actually gone down 4%, not up. And that's more of a true estimate of what the employment situation is.
What are they reporting as unemployment right now?
Well, there's just a bulk number. So right now it's less than 63% in employment for people that want to work. So about 37, almost 38% of people that want to work and able-bodied cannot work. Because they're not finding jobs.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. That is a lot higher than 3.1% or whatever their recent number said. Okay. That's about 10 times that.
Yes.
Okay, so some quick commodities here. We talked last time at the VRAC about uranium. We've had quite the run-up. How do you feel about uranium now?
Uranium is very frothy. I'd be careful from an investment perspective about how you enter it, only because when you see a commodity do that, there's probably at some point going to be a pullback.
Yep.
It doesn't mean the overall trajectory is not going to keep going up. I think if you go to fundamentals, when I look at uranium, I look at the world, I look at Germany and Europe on fire right now with inability to heat their homes, to facilitate industry. And what's going to propel them back into uranium is the fact that if they can't run their economy, they're going to collapse, and the politicians don't want that.
Yeah.
Collapsing economies are not good for politicians.
Yeah.
So I think that all of a sudden they're going to become very enamored with uranium, and uranium is being demanded so much in China. China uses a lot of coal. They have pollution issues there. They had passed pollution resolution standards that would put them on par, almost on par with Europe and the U.S.
Yeah.
To get there, they got to get rid of some coal, and so they don't have the natural gas to be able to do everything they need to do. Nobody really does. For China, it's a huge place. They're going to have to go to uranium. So uranium and eventually thorium, maybe 20, 30 years from now, next generation, I think are going to be energy sources that are come out of the ground that are so much safer than they used to be that the world's going to turn to. a lot of the alarmism around clean energy really shouldn't apply to uranium because uranium doesn't release carbon dioxide. I don't believe carbon dioxide is greenhouse gas, by the way, but it doesn't release it anyway.
Yeah.
And the disposal of uranium is much more sanitary now. They can reuse uranium for other purposes. So it's not the same thing it was back in the 60s. It's a totally different way of utilizing uranium in those reactors. And you can do it in a way that doesn't become Fukushima.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know that. They have the fear of Fukushima or the fear of Chernobyl.
Yeah.
But it's really about educating people. It's not that way anymore. The innovation, the technology around it is so much safer than it used to be.
Yeah. Okay. Gold and silver. How do you
Yes.
feel about those?
Gold and silver are going to become money again. We were just talking in the conference about Gresham's Law. One of the things that I do is we're doing a lot of lobbying of legislatures to pass confirming amendments in the states of Article 1 Clause, Section 2 Clause 10. The gold and silver is money. I think money will eventually come back in, Gresham's Law, or the reverse of Gresham's Law, if you will. You know, the bad money eventually, when it collapses, good money will come back in. We'll have a reestablishment of that. But I also think there are free market alternatives that people will use as currencies like Bitcoin, things like that as well. But I think that the people are going to determine what that is. I think the government, when this failure comes, the people aren't going to have faith in the government anymore to choose their money, and people are going to say, I want to choose the money, and I think that's the biggest thing. I think gold and silver will be a part of that, but I think we'll have other alternatives there as well.
Okay, all right. And last time at the VRAC, we talked about copper.
Yes.
And you called it. You said, I love copper, but not yet.
Yes.
Are we at yet?
Well, there's two forces on copper. There is the immense need to electrify the world and to industrialize the world, especially in the eastern countries, India and China, but also others, Middle East. And look at Africa. Africa is huge.
Yeah.
Tons of resources. How do you pull the resources out of the ground if you don't have electricity?
Yeah.
What do you got to do? You got to electrify. That is the last continent that we have not electrified. And the amount of copper it's going to take is hundreds of times what we know that we have in proven and probable reserves.
Yeah.
So we have to have more copper. So that's going on. But in the shorter term, we have recessionary forces going on.
Yeah.
We have inflation in the United States. We have issues in China. We have issues around the world. If we get into the next, which we have to go into a recession, but we get in the next one, if it's protracted, copper is going to come down just a little bit. Actually,
Yeah.
I think it will relieve the demand side pressure on copper and allow the supplies to catch up. But what it will also do is lead to some destruction of investment in the mines,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And there's going to be what we call like a whiplash effect, where at one point it's going to get really hot and go really fast because the world's going to need it coming out of that recession and money's going to flow into it.
Yeah.
So I think it may be a little while before copper just completely takes off, but it wouldn't surprise me if it really goes big this time because the world needs it in a big, big way.
Yeah. Typically during recessions, copper does not do well.
No.
Because there's less of a demand for it. But
Yeah.
after that recession, should do pretty well, I would
Yeah,
think.
well, even overall demand right now is going to hold it up probably more than people think because yes,
Okay.
we'll have less demand, but the world still needs it. I mean,
Yeah.
when we go into recessions, the economy doesn't stop, it slows down.
Yeah.
I think the overall trend of needing more copper is going to eventually outweigh the short-term, recessionary pressures that we're going to see.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, Rob Kientz, GoldSilverPros.com. Thank you very much for coming
Yes, sir.
on the
Absolutely.
show, Rob. And thank you for tuning in. Hit the like and subscribe, and we will talk to you next time.